Ready.
President Mr. Arcaro,
Present.
Mr. Emery,
Here.
Mr. Goff,
Here.
Mr. Kozowski,
Here.
Mrs. Ledford,
Here.
Mr. Moiseo,
Here.
Mr. Prokowski,
Present.
City Manager Mr. Hockaday.
Here.
Finance Director Mr. Williams, Law Director Mr. Lewis.
Here. Hey, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to the approval of the meeting minutes for May 9th, 2022. Are there any alterations or corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion, Mr. Arcaro. I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Abstain?
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, the meeting minutes for May 9th, 2022 are approved. We have a couple of awards presentations this evening, and we will begin with our Spartan of the Month. And with us in chambers tonight is Shannon Zappatelli. So Shannon, if you'd like to come forward with your family. Right over here, you'll see a faded X. Ms. O'Connell will read the certificate into the record, please.
Certificate of Achievement Spartan of the Month. The Spartan of the Month for May is Shannon Zappatelli. Shannon is a student at the Conneaut High School. Shannon was nominated by her art teacher, Stephanie Chase, who stated, "Shannon is an outstanding young lady who goes above and beyond what is expected of her. She donates her time to creating crafts and art to donate to the Music Boosters and other events to raffle off to benefit these groups. In the classroom, she always makes sure that her work is done well and her creativity shines through in all she does. In youth philanthropy, Shannon headed the community service portion and made arrangements for the group to volunteer at nonprofits. This was a new position this year that needed someone to start the process. Shannon is a kind person who goes out of her way to help others. She interacts well with her peers and adults alike. She is always willing to take on any tasks that she is asked to do, and one never has to worry that it will go unfinished or not be done correctly. Shannon is very well-rounded and takes school and her future plans seriously. She is definitely deserving of Spartan of the Month. Dated this 23rd day of May and signed by council members Terry Moiseo Jr. and Oki Emery.
Shannon, congratulations.
Thank you.
I have the city council. There's something else for you? Appreciation of the city council.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Who's with you?
This is my mom, Karen Zappatelli, my father, Jerry Zappatelli, and then in the back, I have both my grandmas, Robin Zappatelli, and then Dolores Burke, and my brother, Ryan Zappatelli. And then Mrs. Brown is my assistant principal. She was also my third grade teacher.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
again. Thank you. Okay, our next awards presentation will be our Employee of the Month, which is Patrol Officer Dan Pinkett from the Police Department. Come forward. Sergeant Bertolotti, if you'd like to come forward also. You want to just introduce him to the public and say a few words? Nothing spectacular.
Patrolman Pinkett, he's been with us for, well, 7 months now. He's here from Roseville and Kirtland Hills. He's a very good, fine patrolman. Keeps our city safe and makes us take many years of good service.
Okay, welcome aboard. Ms. O'Connell, if you could read the certificate into the record, please.
Certificate of Achievement, Employee of the Month. The Officer of the Month for May is Patrol Officer Dan Pinkett. Officer Pinkett started with the Conneaut Police Department on October 18th, 2021. Since that time, Dan has shown that he's become a valuable asset to the department, whether it's his criminal interdiction and traffic enforcement to his willingness to lend a helping hand. Dan is always there when you need him. Dan has a great rapport when dealing with citizens, most of the time involving a reporting party's crisis. Dan maintains a professional image at all times and is a great representative for the city of Conneaut. Signed, Councilman Nicholas Perkowski and Richard Goff.
Congratulations. We're very proud of you. Very proud of you. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks, Sergeant Bertolotti.
Okay, we also have a special presentation this evening. And we have Matt Crawford. Would like to discuss his latest endeavor.
My name is Matt Crawford. I live at 782 Spring Street, Apartment 9. I founded the Outdoor Learning Center behind Gateway Middle School. And this year out there, we'll be hosting a pollinator symposium. And I brought with me the head of the symposium, Reese Davis, that I'd like to introduce to you, and he'll explain more in depth what's going on. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? My name's Reese Davis. I'm a master gardener with Ashtabula County. The goal of our organization is to do horticulture education in the community. One of your longtime residents, Dorothy Schumann, was the first master gardener in Ashtabula County. And, I think she's got an arboretum named after her in Malik Park. I'm here to tell you just a little bit about an event that we're putting on. It's on June 25th. It's from 8 to 4 p.m. It's at the Gateway Middle School, the Outdoor Learning Center there. And, it's called the 2022 Northeast Ohio Pollinator Summer Festival. Over the last 3 years, we've been planning this, but due to events beyond our control, we couldn't hold it. And we finally are doing it for the first time in June. We've held a series of 10 virtual seminars over the past 2 winters and done quite a bit to educate the public on pollinators, bees, butterflies, and native plants. We maintain a pollinator garden at the Outdoor Learning Center behind the middle school. If you ever get a chance to stop out there, it's well worth the walk around. We're working with Dawn Zapatelli, the principal at the elementary school. She's hosting us, as well as Matt at the Outdoor Learning Center. In the morning of the 25th, we're having some very well-known speakers, published authors. They're going to talk about subjects of interest having to do with pollinators. And Then in the afternoon, on the grounds of the Learning Center, we're having native plant vendors come in, and various nature organizations are going to set up tables to talk to the public. You may have heard of the Sam Warren Nature Club. They'll be there. Your Convention and Visitors Bureau are going to have a tent there and set up to get the word out on Conneaut. And Chief Lee's going to have a unit there to take care of folks, and hopefully it won't be too hot, too cold, and everybody will have a good time. So we'll also have guided hikes through the woods, the Outdoor Learning Center. The Outdoor Learning Center connects to Conneaut Creek, the park there, and sort of off subject, but Matt's working with the Metro Parks to work on a project there to possibly build a nature center, which should be a wonderful opportunity. We're having a tree planting demonstration for homeowners. We're going to have a native tree giveaway. We're going to have some kids' activities led by a group called After School Discovery, and food trucks and some music groups. So if you're in the area and it sounds of interest, we'd love to have you stop out. And thank you for letting us host this event in your city. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate all you guys do, Matt, especially out there at the Learning Center. Is a very nice facility. My wife and I have been out there many times, so you guys do a good job. Thank you for the presentation. Moving on to citizen comments. Anybody have any citizen comments?
I just had one question as to when they're going to start work again on Route 20, either east or west to east, or I did receive an email on that.
So they were out there working today. They were working on sidewalks today. They weren't working on the asphalt piece. So you saw they were working on some of the ADA ramps just east of Parish Road. We were hoping to see their milling machine because they're supposed to do the next section and intermediate proceeding on Route 20, approximately at the Y, Main Street Y, and continue heading east through the downtown. You know, my best hope is if they weren't here today, that they're here tomorrow. They initially said Monday, so I don't know if they got hung over at their
With the
last,
with the milling?
with the milling. Yeah.
I think that was the question they were
Yep.
wondering.
They won't be back to put the top coat on until all the milling and the
Correct.
binders
So,
put down.
so they're gonna keep doing what they just did east of Parish. So they're gonna keep doing little segments. The next segment will be through the downtown. And then they'll do any base repair intermediate course will go down. They'll come in, correct all the concrete. And then the very last thing they'll do is put in the top coat, which is a more flexible based asphalt, but they'll start at one end and go to the other. They'll do that. They won't do it in segments. It'll be one continuous process. And then the final section is casting adjustments that will occur after the top course goes down.
Thank you.
July 30th is their completion date.
Anybody else for communications? Or Ms. O'Connor, do you have any communications?
I do not this evening. Thank you.
Okay, move on to reports of the administration, beginning with the city manager, Mr. Hockaday.
I will try and be brief tonight. I see this giant spreadsheet John Williams brought.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Conneaut Creek Dredge Material Facility, just want to do a quick note on that. We have the grant agreement before you tonight, as well as a couple other fund creations and appropriation ordinances for council to consider. This is the final stage of money, so we can start the advertisement processing after this. So when we get to those, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. The Route 20 water line segment, it is pressurized and in service. What we'll be doing next is we're going to be depressurizing the south line, making sure that it'll handle the Creek Road Tower all by itself, which it should do with ease. And then we'll take that completely out of service, the south line. And that's when that Jersey barrier will disappear on the south side and they'll start installing guardrail. Buffalo Street boring project. Chris Kegelnick informed me that we should have something for our first June work session for advertisement on that project. The water treatment filtration improvements, they continue to work. There is some communications lines being dumped in down over the hill to connect those VFDs to the main building up top. Because they've been working that equipment up down the slope, you might get a question or a call. Traditionally, we've allowed people to use the stairs to go down to access the beach portion, but because of the construction activity, we've kept that closed. It'll probably be closed through the balance of the summer. There are some residents that have beach access along that street that shares the entryway with the water filtration plant. So if you do get a call about that, just because it says construction workers only on there, and it's not a normal footing or condition down there, so we just want to be on the safe side, make sure nobody falls in a hole. We talked about the Route 20 project. That does have that global completion date on all items. Of course, the only thing I can tell you is I've had a couple people ask me as well, I don't think they're moving fast enough to get it all done. Well, I don't know. I can't give you that answer. All I do know is if they don't complete on time, there are liquidated damages that would be assessed. Today would be an example of a day where the sun was shining. It was a workable day and they weren't out there milling and filling. So that would be the kind of thing that would count against them. So hopefully they're here tomorrow and start that milling process. Sewer line project, it's still in progress. I think they've got most of the main line in. They got some top hats that they're going to be going through and doing. So that project will actually be wrapping up here very shortly. I'm hoping by the end of the month they're out of here altogether. In a typical fashion, they've done it in a very workmanlike fashion, get in, get out. So that way they're out of everybody's way. Broad Street reconstruction, Madison Street, only significant update there is I know the library has signed the consent agreements today on the demolition of that big building at the corner. So that'll be going out to bid shortly with the county. That's not going to be directly bid by the city, but that'll be bid by the Department of Community Planning and Services at Asheville County. Obviously, the public works guys are hustling this week, trying to get everything done. We have 3 days of sunshine here. We're going to try to make the most of it. I've told Joe and as well as all the other supervisors, and I do appreciate it. But Mr. Bidwell from sewer, as well as Skip Ensman from water and Rich at water, try and make their crews available to handle whatever we can to make sure we have everything looking the way it should for Memorial Day. We're feeling a little compressed this year with all the wet weather that we've had leading up to this point. I know they've made it through 3 of the cemeteries. Glenwood is always last. So if you drive by it right now, it's not going to look good. We will usually do that and get it finalized on Wednesday. So it's our most trafficked cemetery. So it will look the nicest. So we always save that one for last because it is the most visited. So those guys are working on that. They're going to be working on some stuff downtown. We had a much smaller downtown cleanup a weekend or 2 ago. And I appreciate everybody who was there, but it was a much smaller turnout than we've had in the past. And we were able to get about a block of the downtown done with the limited folks that we had. We did also have some limited city crews there that volunteered this year, which is a little bit understandable. We had a rather large water break on Mill Street the night before, and they were out here till about midnight getting that back up and running. So and speaking of which, our goal right now tentatively is to get that prepped tomorrow for some asphalt, either late tomorrow or early Wednesday. So that will be out of the way. It's a rather large and ugly road cut on the entryway to town. So I think they're going to try and get that done and prep tomorrow morning for hopefully asphalt tomorrow afternoon. The other cut on Clark Street, obviously not as prominent, but we will try and get in there and get that corrected as soon as possible as well. Those are two larger water main breaks, kind of unusual for this time of year. Both are related to, water hammering related to valve turning and other routine work that we've been doing in terms of replacing hydrants and other things. So guys have done a good job, but it's those were two just back-to-back nasty breaks that we had. So we'll try and get those cleaned up as soon as possible. Happy to answer any questions about that. I'm sure I've forgotten something, but if I have, please remind me.
Center Road Bridge, a good guess.
Well, they have 60 days from the date of closure, so they're drawing very near to that 60-day mark.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions for the city manager? Move on to the finance director, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. I did pass out a report for council regarding our workers' comp calculations, our projected ratings. I usually do this every couple of years because sometimes, doing it every year, there really isn't much of a change. But I also attached a couple of years ago report for a comparison. But what we're looking at, and I won't go over all the numbers, but what we're looking at by group is at the very top, our medical payments and compensation payments, medical reserves. So we have a 4-year look back right now and this is for our 2023 workers' comp. We have a 4-year look back. Medical payments over that 4-year period were about 58,000. Compensation payments about 38. Medical reserves are at 13. So we're looking at total payments of about 97, excuse me, and unlimited total modified losses of 110,000. If you look at the previous report, now that had a 6-year look back. You can see the medical payments there were 189,000, compensation 128, reserves were 133 for a total of 452,000. Which you can see we are substantially less than where we were a few years ago. The projected experience rating is basically your modified losses and limited losses with your credibility factor, which hasn't changed. So we have about a 31% credibility factor. The last time we did this, it was about 33. But the key one on the number to look at is the experience modifier. It's at 0.98. Anything less than 1 is losses are less than anticipated. So right now we're at a 0.98, which is very good. Like I said, anything less than 1. If you look at the experience modifier a few years ago, is 1.25, which is not good. And the ratio is at 0.47. Right now we have a negative ratio of 0.13, which is very good. And our maximum value maximum value amount is 87,500. The manual rate projections, we're looking at a 4-year, we're always running a 4-year rolling payroll number. That's about 19 million, almost 20. The Bureau Workers' Comp loss rate that they're expecting is 0.0067, which equates to about 133,000 in losses over a 4-year period. And then we have our limited losses. If you look at the premium rate projections, there's 2 different manuals. That manual 9431 is all city workers. 9439 is strictly volunteer firefighters or part-time firefighters. They have a much higher rate. So the assessment rate or the premium rate is 1.39 on all employees, but it's almost 10% on volunteer firefighters, which the payroll amount isn't as much, but it is at a much higher rate. So we're looking at an adjusted standard premium, excuse me, of 67,000. With the assessments, it's about 84,000. But when we belong to the group retrospective rating program, because we're in this program, there are refunds associated with this program. So the target refund for 2023 is 42%. So our standard premium is about 66,000. We have a 42% target. So we're looking at a program refund of 27,954. The net premium is about 36. And then there's a maximum assessment. If we do not get a refund, our maximum assessment is 15%, which is about nearly $10,000. So what I did is I provide you a chart there. You can look at the refund percentages from the max. Now the max is right now is 62.4%. The last time we had it, it was 80.2. And then the maximum assessment is the 15, which is a negative number there. So if you look at our individual premium without assessments, our projected refunds for each of those percentages, we're looking anywhere from a $25,000 refund to a 27, which is what we're projecting, to a maximum of an additional 9, which would mean our individual premium plus the projected refund, which would actually be a penalty, would be 76,000. And then I provided a chart there for you so you can just kind of visualize what we're looking at. But as I said, if you want to compare it to the previous report, I think this is a much better look at workers' comp and where we're at now. Who knows? Anything can happen. 2021 is considered our green year. These are what it's projected. So the next rating will include 2021, and then we'll drop off 17. But right now things are looking pretty good. In 2022, we paid 134,000. About 4 or 5 years ago, we were paying about 175,000 a year. Now, as you recall, in 2020, we received a very large refund, or they called it a dividend payment from the Bureau of Workers' Comp. It's about $550,000. They used that premium refund or dividend to pay our premium that year, which would have been around 170,000. So things are looking much better from a workers' comp, but as I said, these things can change pretty quickly. If there's a large injury or something like that, but so far things are looking pretty good. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for the finance director? Okay, thank you. On to the law director, Mr. Lewis.
Nothing new to report this week, Mr. Arcaro.
Okay, any questions for the law director? Okay, move on to committee reports.
I have a report, Mr. Arcaro. Public Works met on May the 12th. We discussed the southern roads, gravel roads at length, trying to look at some different funding sources, maybe that we could look at to help alleviate in the short term some of the issues that were discussed at the meeting that night. There was also other options discussed, such as an assessment, and even looking at our current street levy, which right now appears to be really insufficient for what we needed to do. And there was discussion about that. So later in the meeting, under miscellaneous business, I think we'll have probably a follow-up meeting, maybe a more narrow in scope on Thursday, June the 9th at 6 p.m. So that's going to be a tentative right now. The follow-up from that initial meeting on the 12th. So we're making some progress and we intend to have more meetings and keep the conversation going to address the residents' issues in that area, which I think is very important. That's all I have.
Okay. Anybody else for a committee report?
We had a community image meeting. I have some ideas, and I'm not going to bring it up. I'll bring it up at work session. And we had a good meeting. Other than that, I was very happy. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to liaison reports.
I have one of those, Mr. Arcaro. So I attended the Port Authority meeting on May the 19th. The water on all docks has been turned on. The kayak dock at the Float and Fly has been installed. There was a discussion about the current water level being down approximately 10 inches presently. Also, we had some discussion on the playground equipment from Malik Park going to Dean Avenue Park. There were some other ideas as far as picnic tables, benches, which are kind of on cement slabs, and maybe move those to Lakeview Park. And we also had some discussions on the Port Authority signage or the arch that's been discussed in that area. That's all I have on that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for liaison report?
I actually have two reports this evening, Mr. Arcaro. The first one is from the Cable Advisory Board. There was a meeting April 27th. What was mainly discussed was the video on demand and how that views have been increasing from March 28th to April 28th. It tripled over the previous month. So we encourage everyone to visit those sites. Some of the main hits on that site was the community egg hunt, the CAC ribbon cutting, ATEC, Ben Schwartzfigger interview, and the CHS basketball interviews. The Cable Advisory Board also attended the Business Expo and actually had a ad put together that ran throughout it. They also put together a video with programming clips that introduced everyone to the video on demand. And they are focusing on some items. This year, our UH Conneaut Medical Center is celebrating their 100th anniversary. And so the Cable Advisory Board is providing promos and interviews marking the UH Medical Center milestone. We also talked about the Facebook page and the different followers, trying to promote that. If you see it on Facebook, please share. The Business Expo and the Egg Hunt were some big winners there. The next meeting is this Wednesday, May 25th at noon at the Conneaut Public Library. Also would like to talk about, there's the Conneaut Convention Visitor Bureaus meeting, May 10th. Some different ad options were discussed, some of the tabletop ads, pros and cons to that. The main thing I wanted to let you guys know is that they are doing some digital strategy, which I think is very important with our Visitors Bureau. There was 27,334 views in April. Facebook had about 10,000 on Facebook, 17,000 on Instagram. So again, please share anything Conneaut related to make sure we get the word out on things going on. They also discussed the membership. There's a couple people, Tom Smile and Diane McKenna, who has offered to be temporary board members. That was approved. Some highlights and upcoming events. July 2nd through July 4th will be the celebration of 4th of July and fireworks. June 5th is the MS bike event. Tuesday, June 14th will actually be the next meeting at the Port Authority office at 6 p.m. June 25th, the Pollinator Symposium, which we heard about earlier. D-Day this year is August 18th through the 20th. September 6th is going to be the annual Visitors Bureau meeting at Buccia's. And September 10th is the OLC Discovery Day and the Perch and Pilsner weekend. Thank you. That's all I have this evening.
Thanks. Anybody else for a liaison report? If no, we'll move on to our ordinances and resolutions for this evening. We have one ordinance in second reading.
Ordinance 3922, an ordinance to repeal and replace section 509.11 of the City of Conneaut codified ordinances and not declaring an emergency.
Want me to summarize that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a pretty simple summarization. It's just we are making some updates to the noise ordinance, and it will take out the requirement from a police officer have to carry around a decibel meter. It simplifies some things that are basic nuisances like a barking dog or anything making a disturbing loud noise, such as a rooster crowing, so on and so forth. Mr. Lewis, I think, did a really nice job kind of updating this, making it a little more modernized for today. So I think the intent and discussion previously was to take this all 3 readings. If somebody would make that motion.
Any questions or comments regarding this ordinance? Okay, Mr. Moiseo.
I'll make a motion to move ordinance 3922 to third reading.
Okay, ordinance 3922 has been moved to a third reading.
I'll second it.
Okay, moving on to ordinance 4022.
An ordinance authorize payment to the following contractors in the amounts listed in section 1 below pursuant to section 5705.41 D1 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Williams.
I think Mr. Hockaday wanted to address the first one.
Yeah, I'll cover the first one. I provided council with this summary. So this was the final bill on the roofing for the Clark Street water distribution building. If you recall, it had some pretty serious wall and roofing issues. The contractor initially provided us a base quote, not knowing the condition of some of the wood and other sheathing underneath that, and that was on a per unit basis. Mr. Ensman with the water distribution department pulled a purchase order for the base amount. And as you can see, the amount of replacement, and I believe the contractor did a nice job of itemizing the extra costs associated with it. There was a lot of rot. There were 5 layers of roofing on there. And it was quoted to have 3 for tear off. So that's a lot of extra dumpster space. There was an additional 44 sheets of OSB decking at $70 a per sheet. There was 22 feet of 1-inch planking at $16.70 per lineal foot. So you can see that final price there was an additional $7,458.79 required to complete it. Have no issues. The contractor did a nice job of keeping track of all those quantities for this. Skip really couldn't, Mr. Ensman couldn't get a purchase order in place without just grossly overestimating what the final cost would be. Just ask that council approve this so we can pay the contractor what was owed per the agreement.
Council, have any questions regarding that first one? Okay, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, the other 3 are all CT consultants. The one is for the wastewater treatment plant. Their pre-treatment engineering purchase order was obtained after the fact. It's over 3,000. There's not much we can do other than have council approve it after the fact. The dredge reclamation payment, I try and keep the purchase orders open as long as possible. We have a 180-day window on our purchase orders. Sometimes with the projects, I can keep them open longer. This one was billed in March. The purchase order wasn't obtained until April for 48,215.07. And then the Route 20 Dominion gas line, there's no way of us really estimating other than getting a purchase order for a blanket amount, which I have done before. But this one is 7,048.02. Purchase order was obtained after it was billed, I believe, at the end of the year. So we need to have this approved. There may be additional payments that we'll have to make. So I'll make the purchase order out for, say, 20,000. I don't know if that'll be sufficient. If it isn't, we can always come back again.
I'm thinking we're probably close. I mean, they've completed that project and, obviously their billing's catching up on an arrearage. This is per the contract with Dominion. So it's reimbursable, but knowing what their ultimate time on site was until they furnish it, we really don't know how much time that they had on the site during that period. So we could get one for 20. I don't know if it's going to be that much. Chris Kagelnik was off a good portion this last week for some personal stuff, but I will follow up with him and see if that's a reasonable estimate. But this should be close to the final. I think they would have caught up to us at that point. So, and the dredge facility is one that we've been carrying forward, and we've had purchase orders. If they expire, we got to get them reissued. So that's obviously a larger project that is ongoing.
And that's covered 100% by grant. So
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Arcaro. Well, hold on a minute. I'm sorry. I'd like to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance 40-22.
Okay, there's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 4022. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
I'd like to make a motion to declare ordinance 40-22 an emergency.
The motion to declare ordinance 4022 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 40-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 4022. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Ordinance 4022 is passed. Move on to ordinance 4120.
An ordinance authorizing all actions necessary to accept Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council 2022 Energized Community Grant and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday.
Okay, so this is just the acceptance of the NOPEC grant that we received, I believe, the past 7 years or so, even preceding that. We just have to acknowledge and accept the funds. Council will have the opportunity to select what those funds will be given towards. We don't have to make that decision now. So you're just saying, I agree to take the grant funds. It's usually for updating or creating more efficient elements to our community, whether that's LED lighting in the downtown or in City Hall, or it can be contributed to any energy efficiency project that the city sees fit. So we'll discuss at the June work session where council would like to see that placed. It's been a little higher in past years. I believe this year It's a little bit less. I want to say around $30,000. So we'll have that discussion at a forthcoming meeting. But for the time being, council just needs to say, yes, we agree to accept the dollars. There's no match required.
Okay. Any questions?
Is there a grant amount?
Yeah, about 30.
30,000?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Make the motion to suspend the three reading rule for ordinance 41-22.
There's a motion to suspend a three reading rule on 4122. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Emery.
I'd like to make the motion to declare an emergency for ordinance 41-22.
Motion to declare an emergency on 4122. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Emery, the emergency's been declared.
I'd like to act on ordinance 41-42.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 4122. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 4122 is passed. Move on to ordinance 4222.
An ordinance to authorize the Conneaut Port Authority to host a 4th of July celebration at Lakeview Park on July 2nd, 2022, from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday.
This is the same thing that we do just about every year. The Port Authority is the lead sponsor this year. That's really the only difference. You can see the two ordinances back to back, 42 and 43, are both related to the same subject. Port Authority's done a nice job with it in the past, and of course it includes the celebration festival piece on July 2nd, and then obviously the fireworks that Saturday. So glad to see the Port Authority doing this. It's kind of bounced around in the last couple of years, but it's nice to see the Port Authority taking this on.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to waive the three reading rule for ordinance 42-22.
There's a motion to suspend the three reading rule on 4222. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Prokowski.
I'd like to make a motion to declare an emergency on ordinance 42-22.
There's a motion to declare an emergency on 4222. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski, the emergency's been declared.
I'd like to move to act on ordinance 42-22.
This motion to act on 4222. Is there a second?
Second.
second,
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
The ordinance 4222 is passed. Move on to Ordinance 4322.
An ordinance to authorize the use of the sandbar area for the purpose of hosting a 4th of July fireworks presentation and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to
Go
to
ahead, Jamie.
suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 43-22.
There's a motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 4322. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ledford?
this time I'd like to declare ordinance 43-22 an emergency.
Motion to declare ordinance 4322 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
this
Mrs.
time I'd like
Ledford.
to act on ordinance 43-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 4322. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
The ordinance 4322 is passed. Move on to ordinance 4422.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to enter into a grant agreement with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency for the Conneaut Creek Dredge Material Facility Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday, you want to say anything else on that?
Well, not at this time. I've provided council with the previous drafts. This is the final draft of this. Only 2 things that I'll note for you in this and the subsequent ordinances, which is grant agreement, fund creation, and appropriate line and appropriation. In conference with Mr. Lewis and Mr. Williams, as well as CT Consultants and the Ohio EPA, you can see that 100% of this $9 million is directed at construction. The reason being is that these are ARPA dollars that are pipelined through the state of Ohio, and they are ARPA funding restricted. So they're not very flexible dollars. So they're being utilized exclusively for construction as an eligible activity. So that is intentional. The prior state capital dollars that we have received and are still holding from ODNR in 2 different phases, a $4 million phase and a $1.9 million phase. Those are significantly more flexible dollars. So those soft costs like engineering and other things are coming out of those dollars. So, but as far as these Ohio EPA dollars that are ARPA dollars, they're 100% directed at construction. So if you see that noted in this and subsequent ordinances, that's why.
Okay. Any questions? When would they anticipate construction?
We are hoping to have this out to bid and back here in July for a groundbreaking. This is almost all earthwork. So we need the soils to be at a certain desiccation level. It can't be sopping wet soil. It won't achieve compaction ratios. So there probably wouldn't, even if we had a bid in hand, they wouldn't be working on it right now because it's still too wet. So they might be delivering material to site, but that's it. But we're hoping for a groundbreaking here in July. The bid package will have a couple different alternatives on timeline as well, with various completions to operation timelines for the contractor.
Okay.
As soon as possible is the short answer.
All right. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Make motion, Mr. Carroll, to suspend the 3 reading rule for ordinance 44-22.
Okay, there's a motion to suspend the three reading rule on 4422. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Emery.
I'd like to declare an emergency for ordinance 44-422.
It's a motion to declare an emergency on ordinance 4422. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Emery, the emergency's been declared.
Mr. Kara, I'd like to act on ordinance 44-42 or 22.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 4422. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Ordinance 4422 is passed. Move on to ordinance 4522.
An ordinance to create Fund 333 OEPA dredge grant for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the Ohio EPA grant received for the Coniac Creek Dredge Material Facility.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to waive the three reading rule for ordinance 45-22.
There's a motion to suspend a three reading rule on 4522. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Prokowski.
I would like to declare an emergency for ordinance 45-22.
You just moved to act.
Oh,
It's okay.
yes. I move to act on ordinance 45-22.
It's a motion to act on ordinance 4522. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
The ordinance 4522 is passed. Move on to ordinance 4622.
An ordinance to create line item 333-933-57200, construction, and to appropriate $9 million to said line item.
Questions? Is there a motion?
Mr. Arcaro, I'll make a motion to. Go ahead, Chair.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I'll make a motion to waive the three reading rule on ordinance 4622.
There's a motion to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 4622. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kozowski,
I move we act on 46-22.
there's a motion to act on ordinance 4622. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 4622 is passed. That concludes our ordinances for this evening. We'll move on to unfinished no business. I do have one thing here in my notes. The Port Authority has requested donation for fireworks, I think. Did we talk about that at the work session?
I think so, if I recall.
So it's up to council what you would like to do regarding that.
Didn't we?
We did.
Did we vote on it already?
Yeah,
Yeah. We did.
pretty sure we did.
No, we discussed it and said yes to it,
thought we did.
but that we would move forward with it.
Right, but wasn't brought forward. That's what I'm asking.
I don't recall any vote ever being taken on it. It was just discussed.
Okay.
All right.
So you need a
As you
motion.
know,
I think we need that,
Any
an amount. correct?
appropriation.
Need a
has to
motion
be
and an
done.
amount.
We agreed on an amount.
Did we?
We did.
Yes.
2,500 or 2,000?
Do you remember, John?
I thought it was 1,000
Yeah,
because you said that.
it was 1,000.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you said they had other funding that they were
Yes.
getting as well, so.
Somebody would like to make a motion
I'll make that motion
for,
for $1,000 for fireworks for Port Authority.
okay, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Lightford,
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes for $1,000 for fireworks. Anybody else for unfinished and old business? Miscellaneous business.
Mr. Arcaro, I have, well, maybe two things, but four-wheelers on Woodworth and Old Main. Mr. Hockaday, if we could step up the patrol.
Anybody else for miscellaneous business?
Public Works Committee meeting, June the 9th, which is a Thursday at 6 PM. And then the news media able to get that out. And then I'll reach out to some other individuals. They can pass the word also. Yeah, we did previous meeting.
Okay. Anybody else? I have a couple things. Received a email from the clerk of the county commissioners. Apparently they're having coffee with the commissioners at Root Down Coffee Shop this Wednesday, 9 a.m. If anybody would like to stop down and have a coffee with the commissioners. Also, can't forget to congratulate Mr. Williams once again on your award.
That was, yeah. Thank
was
you very
what?
much. That was from last year, but
Okay,
yeah, thank you though. I
So
appreciate it. Yeah.
we're just
Thank you.
congratulate
Thank
you
you. Thank you.
because you just got it, didn't you?
Yeah, that one was a little
It was
delayed.
late.
Yeah, that was.
I'll be so modest.
Keep up the good work.
Thank
And the Vietnam Wall that heals. Apparently, we were told late about this. It's going to be a procession, large procession through the city this Wednesday morning. So
Oh,
hopefully the media can put something out and the public can show their support for that. It's leaving from Gateway Plaza up 7 to 20 to Erie.
oh, good.
So
Is it 1 PM, Brian?
1 PM. And I believe that's all I have. Thank Mr. Moiseo for keeping things going while I was off, so. Anybody else? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Lightford,
Yes.
Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, City Council for May 23rd, 2022 is adjourned, and we'll have a short recess for the work session.